The carriage turned through the Elm Avenue at 4:30 on a Tuesday in April, and Rosalind Ashworth, Duchess of Whitmore, sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched the house come into view the way a person watches a wound they have learned to live with, carefully, from a distance, with the particular dread of someone who knows the moment of contact is coming. 3 years, she had told herself. In the rented cottage in Dorset, with its low ceilings and its good kitchen garden and its reading circle that met on Thursdays, that she had made her peace with Whitmore Hall. She had told herself that leaving was the bravest thing she had ever done. She had told herself, in the particular quiet of early mornings before anyone else was awake, that she did not miss it. The carriage wheels hit the gravel of the drive, and the house rose before her in the April light. Every window where she remembered it, every stone unchanged, and the 3 years of careful telling collapsed in a single breath. She stepped down without assistance. The front door was already open. Mrs. Prewitt stood in the entrance hall, her hands folded, her eyes bright with something she was too professional to name. "My lady," Mrs. Prewitt said. "Mrs. Prewitt?" Rosalind said. She walked through the entrance hall, and the smell reached her before she had taken 3 steps. Beeswax and verbena. The sachets she had made herself, 24 of them, placed in every linen drawer in the house. She had made them the autumn before she left. They were still there. 3 years later, still there. She stopped at the peg beside the staircase. Her gray wool coat hung exactly where she had left it. The one she had decided not to pack because it was too heavy for Dorset. It had been brushed. Recently, she thought, from the look of it. Someone had brushed it and hung it back. She opened the morning room door and looked through the window at the east garden. The verbena was alive. Barely. The plants were leggy and yellowed, the stems crowded and reaching in the wrong directions, the soil dark with moisture that had nowhere to drain. Beside them, where she had put in the lavender, her mother's lavender, the companion planting her mother had insisted upon every spring, there was nothing. Bare soil and a few dead stems. The lavender had not survived the winter. "Mrs. Prewitt," Rosalind said, without turning from the window. "Who has been tending the east garden?" "His Grace, my lady," Mrs. Prewitt said. "Every morning without fail." Rosalind closed the morning room door and stood with her back against it. She heard a door open down the corridor. Edmund's study. She knew that sound. The particular resistance of that door, the way the handle turned before it gave. She had heard it 10,000 times. He appeared in the hall. He was wearing his morning coat, and his hair needed cutting, and he looked exactly as she remembered him, except for something around the eyes that she did not have a name for yet, and did not intend to examine closely. He saw her. Neither of them spoke. The hall clock ticked 4 seconds. She counted them without meaning to, the way she had always counted things when she needed to keep her hand still. "Rosalind," he said. "Edmund," she said. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he has been trying to remember the exact shape of for 3 years and is now discovering he had it right. "Philip said Tuesday," he said. "It is Tuesday," she said. He stood in the center of his own entrance hall with his hands at his sides, and she looked past him at the morning room door, and then back at the coat on the peg, and then at the hall table where a breakfast setting had been laid for 2. She could see it through the open dining room door, the second place, the second cup, set as though she had only stepped out for the morning. "You did not change anything," she said. He answered quietly, "No. Not the coat, not the sachets, not the breakfast setting." He held her gaze. "No." She waited. He did not add anything. Edmund had never been a man who added things, That was precisely the difficulty. 3 years, Edmund, and the house looks exactly as I left it. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, I did not know what to change. I did not know what any of it meant. She set her bag down on the hall floor. She looked at him directly, which she had been avoiding since she stepped out of the carriage. That is why I left, she said. Behind her, through the morning room window, the verbena pressed its yellowed stems against the glass in the April wind, and the soil around its roots was darker and wetter than it had any right to be, and the bare ground beside it held the ghost of the lavender she had planted the week her mother died. Mrs. Prewitt carried Rosalind's trunk upstairs herself, which was entirely unnecessary and entirely characteristic. And on the first landing she said, with the careful precision of a woman choosing each word like a stone for a path across uncertain ground, I should mention, my lady, that the county has understood you to be visiting family in Dorset these 3 years. Rosalind stopped on the stair. Visiting family, she said. Your aunt, my lady, in the general understanding. Rosalind turned to look at her housekeeper. Mrs. Prewitt met her gaze with the steady expression of a woman who had been managing the consequences of other people's decisions for 30 years, and had developed considerable patience for the process. And what does the county believe about why I have returned? Rosalind asked. For your brother's wedding, my lady, Mrs. Prewitt said. As is entirely expected, there has been that is to say, there are no questions. No questions, Rosalind repeated. No, my lady, Mrs. Prewitt said. Rosalind turned back to the stairs and continued upward, and Mrs. Prewitt followed, and neither of them said anything further until they reached the bedroom door. The room was exactly as she had left it. The hairbrush on the vanity, her silver-backed hairbrush, the one with the initials her mother had given her at her wedding, sat in precisely the position she had set it down in the morning, before she left. The book on the bedside table was still marked at page 112, which was where she had stopped reading the night of the midsummer ball, because after midnight she had not been capable of anything as steady as reading. The curtains were the same. The coverlet was the same. The chair by the window still held the shawl she had decided not to pack, because she had packed it, and then taken it out again, and then left it, because she had needed to make a decision and stop. Rosalind stood at the bedroom window and looked down at the east garden. From here she could see the full extent of it. The verbena in its crowded, yellowing rows. The bare soil where the lavender had been. The path she had laid out herself with stones from the south field, still there, still straight. Mrs. Prewitt, she said. My lady, Mrs. Prewitt answered. I will stay through the wedding, for Philip's sake. Yes, my lady. I will require the guest room to be prepared for Miss Harriet's mother when she arrives on Thursday. The east-facing room, not the one above the kitchen. The chimney in that one draws badly. I'll see to it this afternoon, my lady. And I will need the kitchen menus for the week. The florist will need to be contacted by tomorrow morning. Of course, my lady. Rosalind put her fingers on the cold glass of the window. Below, the verbena moved in the wind, leggy and reaching. Mrs. Prewitt, she said, who has been watering the east garden every morning? There was a brief pause. His Grace waters it himself, my lady, Mrs. Prewitt said. He will not have anyone else touch it. Rosalind did not respond to this. She kept her eyes on the struggling plants below, and said nothing, and Mrs. Prewitt, who had worked for the Whitmore household for 22 years and understood the particular silences of the people in it, set the trunk down quietly and left the room. Philip arrived at Whitmore the following morning in a state of barely contained anxiety that expressed itself as cheerfulness, which was a family trait Rosalind recognized from their father and had never found particularly useful. Rosalind, he said, finding her in the morning room with a cup of tea and the florist's catalog. "You look well. Actually, you look formidable. Is that a new coat?" "It is not," she said. "Sit down, Philip. You are making the room smaller." He sat. He was 24 and handsome and genuinely kind, which was a combination Rosalind had always found slightly miraculous. And she loved him with the particular fierceness of an older sister who has watched a younger brother grow up well against the odds. "I need to ask you something," he said. "You need me to manage the wedding arrangements," she said. "The flowers, the seating, the kitchen. Harriet's family is particular, and you trust no one else." He stared at her. "I was going to lead up to that," he said. "I know," she said. "The answer is yes. Give me the Fenton family's requirements, and I will have a plan by this afternoon." He exhaled, and the relief on his face was so complete and so transparent that she had to look back at the catalog to avoid being moved by it. "Thank you," he said. "Rosalind, thank you." She began her lists. By early afternoon, she had filled 4 pages, and she went to the east garden to think through the flower arrangements, because she had always thought better outdoors, and because she told herself it had nothing to do with anything else. Edmund was there. He was crouched beside the verbena with a pair of scissors. Kitchen scissors, she noted, not the garden shears from the tool shed, which told her everything she needed to know about the state of the tool shed. And he was cutting at the stems with a grip that pressed the blades together rather than sliding them, crushing the tissue instead of cutting it cleanly. She watched him for a moment. He had not heard her on the gravel path. He was frowning at the plant with the concentrated expression of a man attempting something he knows he is not doing correctly, but has no one to ask. She walked forward and put her hand over his on the scissors. He went still. She felt his fingers under hers, the warmth of them, the slight roughness of a man who had been doing his own garden work for 3 years without gloves. She held his hand on the scissors for a moment and then adjusted his grip. Index finger here, not there. The blade should slide, not press. And she held it 3 seconds longer than instruction required. And then she released. "Not like that," she said. "You are crushing the stem. The cut needs to be clean, or the wound rots." She demonstrated on the nearest stem, a single clean movement, the scissors sliding through at the second node, and handed the scissors back to him without meeting his eyes. "The second node," she said, "not the first. And the lavender is dead because it needed to be in the ground before the first frost. It cannot be replanted until May." She walked back inside without another word. The rehearsal dinner was on Thursday evening, and Rosalind moved through it the way she moved through all things that required management, with the calm efficiency of a woman who had learned early that visible effort was a form of weakness and had constructed her competence into something that looked, to the uninformed observer, entirely effortless. She redirected a footman with a glance when he was about to place the wrong wine on the wrong end of the table. She changed a placement card between the fish course and the meat course because she had noticed 3 minutes into the dinner that Sir Andrew Fenton and old Lord Carew had a history that would make the current seating arrangement unpleasant for everyone within 4 chairs. She managed a conversation between Harriet's mother and Lady Carew that had been developing toward disaster by asking Lady Carew a question about her garden that required a 12-minute answer. Edmund watched from across the table. She noticed him noticing. She had always noticed Edmund. That had never been the difficulty. The difficulty had always been that she could not determine, from the watching, what he saw. The neighbor to Rosalind's left, Mrs. Alcott, a pleasant woman from the neighboring estate, who had been at Whitmore for every significant occasion for 20 years, leaned toward her during a lull and said warmly, 3 years in Dorset, Lady Whitmore. You must have had a lovely time. How is your aunt keeping?" Rosalind set down her wine glass. "My aunt died in 1819, she said. I was not in Dorset visiting her." Mrs. Alcott's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. The table had gone quiet enough that the words had carried. Edmund, across the table, did not move. His fork was in his hand, and he set it down. And he became very still in the way that a man becomes still when he understands that something has just changed, and he cannot yet calculate the extent of it. Rosalind did not look at him. She turned back to Mrs. Alcott with a pleasant expression and asked after her eldest daughter. And the conversation moved on, and the dinner concluded with the Fenton family expressing themselves satisfied with the arrangements, which was the best outcome Rosalind had been aiming for. Afterward, she stepped to the terrace door. The night air was cold and smelled of the garden below. She stood with her back straight and her hands loose at her sides and breathed. She felt the weight of the shawl settle over her shoulders before she heard him behind her. She knew the shawl. It was the one from the bedroom chair, the one she had taken out of the trunk and left behind. She felt its particular weight, the softness of the cashmere at the edge, and she understood that he had kept it on the chair for 3 years and had brought it downstairs tonight, and she did not remove it. She adjusted it with one hand, pulling it closer at the shoulder, and did not turn around. Not. In the corridor outside the dining room, Edmund fell into step beside her. "You managed the entire evening," he said. "I watched you redirect the Fentons twice, change the seating without anyone noticing, and prevent whatever was developing between Lady Carew and Mrs. Fenton." "Yes," she said. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I thought the house ran itself." She stopped walking. She turned to look at him fully in the corridor light, with the noise of the departing guests still audible from the dining room behind them. "Yes," she said. "You did." He opened his mouth and then closed it, and she saw him searching for the next sentence and not finding it, and she turned and walked on. The ballroom door was at the end of the east corridor, and she had not intended to stop at it. But she found herself with her hand on the handle before she had consciously decided anything. She pushed it open. The room was cold and dim. The furniture and dust covers, the chandeliers unlit. The pianoforte stood against the far wall, uncovered. She had never put a cover on the pianoforte. She had thought it unnecessary, and it was open to the piece she had been playing the night of the midsummer ball. She could see the music from across the room. She had left it open. It was still open. She walked to the bench and sat down. She put her right hand on the keys and pressed one note. It rang through the empty room, clear and cold. She played a second bar. She heard him come in. She heard him stop behind her, a few feet away, and she did not turn. She played a third bar, and then a fourth, and then she heard the sound of his hand settling on the closed lid of the pianoforte beside her. Not on her shoulder, not on her hands, but on the wood beside her hands, close enough that she could see his fingers in her peripheral vision. He began to tap the lid in time with the music. Clumsily, the rhythm of a man who had listened to her play 100 times and absorbed something of the shape of it without ever learning the count. She reached up and covered his tapping hand with hers. She pressed it flat against the wood and stilled it. "You are off tempo," she said. His hand did not move beneath hers. She did not remove her hand. Harriet Fenton came to Rosalind's room the following morning, which was not something Rosalind had anticipated, and sat in the chair by the window with the directness of a 22-year-old who had not yet learned that directness was considered a liability in women. "I want to say something," Harriet said. "And I would like you to tell me if I am being impertinent, because Philip says I am often impertinent, and I am trying to improve." "Say it," Rosalind said. "Your husband looks at you the way my grandfather looked at the sea after he could no longer sail." Harriet said, "Every time you're in the room, every time you leave it. I wanted you to know that I have noticed, because it does not seem like the look of a man who does not care." Rosalind was quiet for a moment. "Did your grandfather ever learn to swim?" she asked. Harriet considered this. "No," she said. "He stood on the shore and watched. He watched until he died." "Yes," Rosalind said. "That is what I am afraid of." Harriet left, and Rosalind remained at the window, looking down at the east garden, and the verbena in its struggling rows, and the bare soil where the lavender had been. That same afternoon, in Edmund's study, Mrs. Prewitt placed a bundle of letters on his desk. They were tied with household string. Quarterly letters, each one unsigned, each one in a handwriting that Edmund had spent 3 years looking at on household accounts and could not have failed to recognize. "These came from Dorset," Mrs. Prewitt said. "Quarterly, over 3 years. Instructions for the roof repair in the second winter. The kitchen stores before the hard January. The tenant Christmas baskets each year. She managed this house from Dorset, Your Grace, every quarter without signing her name." Edmund picked up the first letter. He read it. He put it down and picked up the second. "She left me," he said. It was not quite a question. "She left you," Mrs. Prewitt said. "She did not leave this place. I have been trying to understand, for 3 years, whether you knew the difference." He read all 12 letters. It took him an hour. At dusk, he found Rosalind in the east garden, standing at the edge of the verbena bed with her hands in her coat pockets, looking at the bare ground where the lavender had been. "You sent instructions to Mrs. Prewitt," he said, "for 3 years." She did not turn. "Yes." "The roof, the stores, the tenant baskets?" Her voice was steady. "Yes." "Unsigned?" She kept her eyes on the garden. "Yes." He came to stand beside her. The evening light was flat and gray, and the garden smelled of damp soil and the faint green scent of the verbena, which persisted even in its struggling state. "Why?" he said. She was quiet long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "I could not stop. The house needed. I knew what it needed, and I could not stop knowing." His hand hung at his side. She reached across and took it. A brief, deliberate grip. Her fingers around his for a moment that was too short to be comfort and too long to be accident. Then she released it and walked back toward the house. And he stood in the dimming garden with the warmth of her hand already fading from his, and the verbena pressing its yellowed leaves against the evening air. Aldridge had been Edmund's valet for 11 years, and he had the particular loyalty of a man who has watched his employer do something inadvisable for a very long time, and has developed opinions about it. He found Rosalind in the morning room the following morning before breakfast, which was either coincidence or calculation, and Rosalind suspected the latter. "I beg your pardon for the interruption, my lady," Aldridge said. "What is it, Aldridge?" she said. "I thought you should know. No one asked me to tell you this, my lady. That His Grace read your note every morning for the first year. The one you left on the pillow. Every morning, before he came downstairs." Rosalind did not move. "After the first year," Aldridge continued. "He put it in the prayer book beside his bed, the one his mother gave him. He put your note there so it would simply be present, the way he said you always were. It is still there, my lady." Aldridge left. Rosalind stood at the morning room window for a long time. Then she took the note from her coat pocket. She had carried it for 3 years, her own copy, the draft she had written before the final version. And she read it. I cannot be your climate and your stranger at the same time. I have been both for 4 years. I am leaving before I become only the weather." She folded it again and put it back. That evening, Edmund sat alone in his study with the horticultural text that Mrs. Prewitt had brought him in the 2nd year. A thick volume, practical and unromantic, with illustrations of root systems and pruning diagrams. He opened it to the verbena entry. The margins were covered in his handwriting. Dates, questions written and then answered in different ink, meaning he had written the question and then found the answer later and returned to record it. Drought between waterings. Confirmed April, 2nd year. 2nd node cut. Ask Philip. Philip does not know. Companion planting. Lavender. Why lavender? Aphid protection? He read the entry aloud to himself in the empty study. The way a man reads something he is trying to commit to memory because he's afraid of losing it again. Across the house, Rosalind lay awake in the room where her hairbrush sat unmoved and her book sat page-marked. And at 4:30 in the morning she rose, put on her coat, and went down to the garden. The verbena was worse in the early light than it had appeared at dusk. She could see it clearly now, the roots sitting in soil that had been watered too consistently, too generously, too faithfully by a man who had given it everything it did not need and nothing it required. The stems were leggy from reaching for light they could have had if they had been cut back properly. The companion bed was bare, dead stems in bare soil. She knelt in the dirt and took hold of the first yellowed stem. "You are up early." Edmund's voice. She had not heard him on the path. "So are you," she said without looking up. He came to stand at the edge of the bed. He was in his morning coat, his hair uncombed, and he looked at the verbena with the expression of a man confronting evidence of a long failure. "You overwatered it," she said. "I watered it every morning," he said. "Verbena needs drought between waterings. The roots need to dry out. You were drowning it with attention." He crouched down beside her. She continued working, pulling the worst of the yellowed stems, pressing the soil back where it had been waterlogged. "You killed the lavender," she said. "I did not know it was lavender," he said. "It was planted beside the verbena. They grow together. My mother always planted them together." "I did not know that either," he said. She sat back on her heels and looked at the bare ground where the companion plants had been. Her hands were already dark with soil. "You told the county I was visiting my aunt," she said. He did not answer immediately. She turned to look at him. "Yes," he said. "You erased it. I walked out of this house at 4 in the morning. I packed one trunk, I left you a note on the pillow, I made the most difficult decision of my life. And you told people I had gone for an extended visit. You turned the only brave thing I ever did into a holiday." "I could not say you left," he said. Saying it made it real. It was real, Edmund. She pulled a dead stem from the soil, and the roots came up with it, black and rotted from the constant moisture. 3 years, a cottage with one maid, a kitchen garden I built from bare ground, a reading circle, a school where I taught French to farmers' daughters on Wednesday afternoons, a life. And you told people I was visiting family, as if I had gone for tea and simply lost track of time. I was ashamed, he said. Of me? Of myself. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the words came the way words came from Edmund. One at a time, each one costing him something she could hear. Of being a man whose wife left, and who could not explain why. Because explaining why meant saying that I did not know what she had planted in the East Garden, and that sentence is the most damning thing a husband can say. She did not respond. She kept working. He He stayed crouched beside her in the cold morning light, in his good coat, in the dirt. "Mrs. Prewitt told me about the letters," he said. "I know," she said. She told me you read my note every morning." "Then we are both exposed," he said. She gripped the trowel. "What letters?" "Unsigned. Quarterly. Your handwriting, the roof, the kitchen, the tenant baskets. You managed this house from Dorset for 3 years, Rosalind." She had not intended him to know. She felt the particular discomfort of a private act made public. The same discomfort, she thought, that he must feel about the note in the prayer book. "I could not stop," she said. "The house I knew what it needed." "You left me, but you could not leave the house," he said. "That is what Mrs. Prewitt said." "Mrs. Prewitt talks too much. She said you left because I never understood the difference between the house and you." The trowel went still in her hands. "There is no difference," she said. "That is what you still do not see. The house, the garden, the seating charts, the quarterly letters, the tenant Christmas baskets. That was not administration. That was not duty. That was me. Every system I built in this house, every arrangement I made, every plant I put in the ground, that was how I loved you. And you walked through it every day, like a man walking through weather. You felt it. You were warmer for it. You never once looked up to see where it came from." He was silent. The light was strengthening. The birds had started in the elms. "What do you want, Rosalind?" he said. "Not what the house needs. Not what Philip needs. Not what the county expects. What do you want?" She looked at him. No ballroom. No audience. No glass raised in her direction across a crowded room. "I want to be known," she said. "Not admired, not managed, not preserved. Known. I want someone who can tell me what I planted in this garden without being told. I want someone who knows why I planted it." He held her gaze, and then he began to speak. "Verbena," he said. "Because your mother died in April, the 14th of April, 1820, and verbena was her remedy for headaches. She kept it in the still room. You planted it here in the east bed, where you could see it from the morning room window. So it would be the first thing you saw in the morning during the month she died. The lavender was companion planting. Your mother grew them together because lavender keeps the aphids from the verbena. The oils in the lavender repel them. She never grew one without the other. You planted them together because she would have." Rosalind's hands went still in the soil. "Mrs. Prewitt told me the verbena," he said. "Aldridge told me about your mother's still room. He remembered from when you first came to Whitmore. You asked him where the drying racks were kept. Your brother told me about the lavender. He said you were 8 years old when your mother first showed you the companion planting, and you asked her why they needed each other. And she said that some plants protect each other from what would destroy them alone." He paused. "I have been learning your garden the way a man learns a language he should have spoken from birth. I am slow at it, but I have not stopped." She looked at him. He was kneeling in the dirt in his morning coat, with soil on his knees and the early light on his face. And there was no audience, and no glass raised, and no room full of people to receive what he was saying. It was only him, saying it directly, at a cost she could hear in every word. She reached across the struggling verbena and took his face in both her soil-covered hands, her thumbs on his cheekbones, her fingers in his hair, and she kissed him. When she pulled back, there were dark marks on his face where her hands had been. "You have dirt on your face," she said. "You put it there," he said. She held his gaze. "Yes." They stayed in the garden while the light came up over the elms she had planted in the 2nd year, and the verbena pressed its yellowed leaves toward the strengthening sun, and the bare soil beside it waited for what would be put back. The Whitmore Chapel held 40 guests, and Philip and Harriet were married on Saturday morning in April sunshine that came through the south windows and made the stone floor look like water. Rosalind had arranged the flowers herself, working in the chapel the evening before with 2 housemaids and a great deal of garden twine. She had used verbena and lavender. The lavender bought from the florist in the village, since her own was dead and would not be replanted until May. And she had arranged them together the way her mother had always arranged them. The silver gray of the lavender threaded through the purple of the verbena, each stem placed with the particular attention of someone who understands why the 2 plants belong beside each other. Edmund noticed during the ceremony. She saw him notice, a slight turn of his head toward the arrangement on the chapel windowsill. A pause, a recognition. He said nothing. Afterward, in the corridor outside the chapel, while Philip and Harriet received the guests, Edmund came to stand beside Rosalind. "Verbena and lavender," he said. "Together," she said. He nodded. It was the nod of a man filing something carefully away in a place where he would not lose it. The wedding breakfast was held in the ballroom, reopened for the first time in 3 years. Rosalind had arranged the seating. Edmund was beside her, not across the room, not at the far end of the table, but beside her, close enough that she could hear him breathe. Philip's toast was not long. He was not a man who spoke at length when brevity would do, which was a quality Rosalind had always respected in him. "To Harriet," Philip said, raising his glass, "who makes every room warmer, every meal better, every morning worth getting up for. I know this because I pay attention." The room applauded. Edmund turned to Rosalind. His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear it. "You make me feel alive," he said. "I should have said it here, like this. To you, not to a room full of people who were not you." "You are saying it now," she said. 3 years late," he said. "Late is not the same as never," she said. He picked up his wine glass. He did not raise it toward anyone across the room. He simply held it and looked at her, and she looked back, and the ballroom filled with the sound of her brother's happiness. 1 month later, the breakfast room held 2 place settings, both occupied. Rosalind sat with her correspondence, 3 letters from the County Gazette regarding her next horticultural piece, a note from the Dorset Reading Circle, which had continued under new management, a bill from the florist for the wedding flowers. She was making notes in the margin of the florist's bill because the pricing for lavender in April was unreasonable, and she intended to say so when Edmund came in. He crossed to the sideboard and poured her tea first, then his own coffee. He set her cup beside her correspondence without interrupting her reading. Then he stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the east garden. "The verbena needs pruning," he said. "Mrs. Prewitt showed me the second node cut last week, but I want you to check it before I start." Rosalind set down her pen. "You are asking me about the garden," she said. "I am asking you about the garden," he said. She looked at him. He was holding his coffee cup with both hands, watching her with the patient expression of a man who has decided to be patient and is finding it less difficult than he expected. "The pruning should have been done in March," she said. "We are a month behind. We will cut back to the second node and remove anything that is still yellowing at the base. I will show you the difference between a healthy stem and one that needs to come out." "Thank you," he said. "Edmund." His eyes met hers. "Yes. The south chimney draws badly in cold weather. Aldridge should arrange the sweep before November." He set down his coffee and went to the writing desk by the door. He took out a small notebook. She had not seen it before. It was new. And he wrote it down. "The sweep," he said, writing. "Before November." "You never used to write things down," she said. "I never used to understand that they mattered," he said. He put the notebook back and returned to the table, and sat down. And Rosalind picked up her pen and returned to the florist's bill. And the breakfast room held the ordinary sounds of a morning. The scratch of her pen, the clink of his cup, the sound of the garden through the window. Outside, the verbena had been cut back properly. The new growth was already coming, small and green and close to the stem. The way verbena grew when it had been given what it needed, instead of what seemed most like care. Beside it, in the companion bed, the lavender had been replanted. The new shoots were small and silver-gray in the April light, pressing upward through the dark soil, growing toward the verbena the way her mother had always said they would. Each one stronger for the presence of the other, each one protecting what the other could not protect alone. Two people at a breakfast table, the same window, the same morning room view. Everything changed.